you have your mask drawn in, then you can adjust it in several ways. On the menu below in the timeline, you will have a new line that is underneath your text line that says masks. If you open that up, you'll see mask 1, and that mask line will correspond to your whatever color is on outlining the mask that you're using. And remember, that mask is basically revealing whatever is whatever it surrounds in your composition window. Everything else is hidden, so when you move it, and there's several ways to move it, you can reveal other things. So the objective is to do that over time. In order to do that over time, there's a couple of ways. One is to use this little shape menu, which you can use numbers, and you can actually use the rulers. And there's a shortcut, Command R, to open up rulers in After Effects. It's under the View menu, Show Rulers, just like in Illustrator and Photoshop. So you can show your rulers and try to guesstimate by manipulating these pixels in this mask shape menu, which comes up when you click on shape down here in the layer menu. It lets you edit the value pulling out. So there's that dialog box. So that's one way to do it, but that's not the easiest way. I'm going to say cancel. The easiest way is, first, of course, you will have to make a keyframe at the beginning in order to indicate where your beginning position is. And in order to change the position of your mask, you'll start by clicking on the stopwatch and mask shape underneath the color-coded mask of the one mask that you have in your composition window. Why did my, I'm going to point out that my opacity of my text is on 0, and that's why you can't see it now. So I just changed the opacity back to 100. And to move the mask itself, click on the mask 1 and the mask path, then double click on the outline of the mask, and you need to fidget around a little bit, but you can actually select the entire shape and move it around. So here you can see, and so you can do that over time. So for this project, for a start, I'm going to start at the position where I can see the first line of text, and I'm going to read it out loud while I push the space bar so I know how long to leave it up. My grandmother was a nurse. She marched in suffragette parades in New York prior to women being granted the right to vote. Okay, I gave somebody enough time, plenty enough time. And the first thing I'm going to do, I want to make sure that somebody gets to read that all the way through without the mask changing. So I'm just noticing my time. I'm at about 9 seconds. Probably 8 seconds was enough. I'm going to go back and copy my original position by clicking on that keyframe and going Command C, copy. I'm going to come back here to 9 seconds where my current time indicator is located and paste that. And what that'll do is it'll ensure, I'm playing forward now, that I can actually read the text all the way through without it moving around or disappearing or getting unmasked. Okay, but now I'm ready to move it. We've got enough. So we want to shift it forward. So I'm going to move forward in time a little bit, and we're going to make a new keyframe, and I'm going to move my mask down to the next line. So now we have our animation. It's just like moving any object. My grandmother was a nurse. She marched in suffragette parades in New York prior to women being granted the right to vote. I can remember her telling the story of the march, how men lined the streets and called out insults and threw whatever they could find at the women who walked. Okay, and now I imagine you know what we're going to do. We're going to take the last keyframe where we ended and copy that, Command C, go back to where our current time indicator is, and maybe move back a little and go Command V, which is paste. And now we'll move forward a little bit more and click on our mask and move it down to the last line. And now we can read our last line all the way through. We'll take that last position and copy it, go down to frame 28 seconds, and paste that keyframe. And now we have all of our text. It's animated, it appears, and we only had to type it in once. So this is one way that you can make a short movie in a quite simple way using different kinds of images in the background. Now I have another image that's already placed in the background and already masked off. And this is the next thing I'll show, is how to mask an image. So here in my project window is an image of nurses. I've already brought it to the project window. Whoopsie, my scroller is totally out of control all the time. And then I also have another image of suffragettes marching in New York. And those are the two images I was planning to use for this project. And I have already, I'm going to actually just go through the whole steps with you that I've started with this project by getting rid of our mask. I made a mask here, and so you can see I've already made a mask, and I'll just show you how, if you double click on the mask, it's not letting me. Oh, it's locked. That's why. I double click on my mask and on my mask path. I can fidget around and move it around and reveal the rest of my picture. Here it is. So this is one way you're probably really familiar with that people use masks. They use it to help somebody focus on something that is in an image and animate it over time by cutting through from one image to another. So I'll show you how we did that, and it's the same exact process. So there's our entire image of the nurses. I think I'll center it a little bit more and blow it up as much as I can. And I'm going to do that by going ahead and using the scale button, but I'm not going to use the keyframe. I'm just going to use the scale, position it as big as I can get it. And so there's our image. And now we're going to add a mask to it to make different faces be revealed over time. Or maybe just to highlight one person who happens to be his grandmother. So to make the mask, it's the same process. We click on the line with the image where the name of the image is. We go up to the top to the Shapes menu. In this case, we're going to click on Ellipse. And as soon as I click on that image, the rest of it's going to disappear, and only what I encircle will appear. And I'm holding down on the Shift key now to keep that centered. I could enlarge it and show two people. I think I'll do that. But that doesn't make sense because I'm only talking about one person. So maybe I'll reduce the size of it so you can play with it a little bit. Shift key. Again, oops. Now I have encircled them. Here we go. So you kind of have to toggle back and forth between figuring out, are you selecting the background, the part that you're masking, or are you selecting the mask itself? Right now we have the mask itself. We have selected it, and going back to the timeline, I'm going to open up that mask menu and click and put my time indicator at the beginning, 0, and I'm going to click on mask path. And that sets up the possibility of any animation we're going to do. Now I already put a little fade in here. I already had a little fade in that image from the beginning. And I'm going to go ahead to 8 seconds and move that mask. And what that means is that it's going to move slowly over time. Okay, let's do it. And then I would probably, at that point, once it stops on that last woman, you see our text is coming in. I'm going to close the mask menu and just go back to the image and change the transparency at that point. Right now, the transparency is at 100. I want it to be 100 again, so I'm going to copy the keyframe that I had before and paste back that 100% opacity keyframe in. But now I'm going to go forward a little bit, very little bit, and get that right down to 0. Okay, and now here's the beginning of a project. And this is roughed in. I would go back and make some adjustments to how that moves, and the way I would do that is by adding more keyframes. An example of that would be here, where it's a little bit high for this woman. I would open up the mask window again, which is right here inside the timeline. I would open up that mask window again, and I would double click on the mask itself and move it down to that woman to center her a little better, and it will make a new keyframe down here. And now the movement will follow a little better, goes down and then goes up. Oops. Okay, so what's going on here is the view window showed changed to a view for 4 views. It's right here. I hit that by mistake, and you use that if you're doing some kinds of animation. It's a very handy thing because you can see where you're going. All right, so I'm zooming back out, and that is the lesson of how to do masks. You can also do a mask if you have, and that's how you do a mask with a large image, and you can also have 2 images on top of each other. So I'm just going to close out these 2 projects in the timeline, and I'll open up our other one, masking 2 now, and start off by taking our big parade image, which we haven't really used yet. Actually, I'll take the parade image and go ahead and put that in the timeline. And I'm going to use scale to make that big, make that really fill the space. And I can do several different kinds of masks over this. I could, first of all, probably the most common thing. So first of all, what we have already done, just to practice it again, is I could click on that parade image and go up to the ellipse tool again, and I could make a circle inside that parade image. And because I have a black background, it will hide the image any place that I haven't that I haven't filled in with a new shape. So this mask is making the image disappear and show the background wherever it isn't. So that's one way I could work with my mask. But I could also have another image in back. And so let's look at that. It's probably going to be a little crazy. I'm gonna undo this mask because I'll do something that'll make a little more sense, hopefully. So I've got the parade image. I'm gonna click here, and I'm just gonna imagine somebody's writing their memoir of this story. I'm not sure which is the best one. I've got this one hand. I'm gonna bring it in. Let's see. And bring that down. Now I've got two images. I've got this big hand. It's really big. I won't be using it quite so big. And I've got this image of these women. Let's just do one more just for good Okay, that's a really great one. That's really perfect for it. So I'm going to say, okay, I'll take that image. I'm going to actually change the name of it to hand with book. So to change the name, you need to hit the return key, hand with pen. Okay. And instead of that other one, I'm going to use this hand with pen and the suffragettes. And I have an idea that I'll have the hand with pen, which is not very big. Let's make it a little bigger. I'll put that on top by dragging the suffragettes down. And my idea is that I'm going to make a mask so that we can see the suffragettes behind her hands, as if she's writing about it. So the way we're going to do that is first we're going to enlarge it using scale. Great. And then we're going to use the pen tool this time to cut around her. And this, many of you remember this from Illustrator. In this case, we're using the pen tool to make a mask. So if you practice your skills with that really well, you'll be good at this. And this is one of the ways they do the kinds of masks that you might see in productions. Okay, so I need to invert it, obviously. And there is a way to invert it. We go here in the mask window, and we just click on Inverted. And now we have this very cool mask with the women behind, and we could do some more things with that. For example, we could blow those women behind, the suffragettes, up. We're still at 0, so now I'm going to hit the scale, and at 0 I'm going to blow them way up. And now I'm still at 0, and I can change the position, going back to a regular cursor tool, and change the position so we see them at the beginning, and we'll be able to pan by with all those women. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, so I'm going to hit the stopwatch and say position, that's the beginning, and go ahead maybe 5 or 6 seconds, 10, doesn't matter, we can make adjustments and change the position. So now we have this nice animation. Okay, behind the hands, right? Let's test it out. And then the last, and so that's another way that you make a mask. And of course, you can, in this case, you wouldn't want to change that mask because it's really attached to the outline of those hands. And I'm sure you probably recognize this as a technique that's often used in movies. And when we get to the end of that, we could play with it more and, for example, open up the opacity, that's T for transparency, and hit the stopwatch to keep it at 100, but we could fade that out. Go back to black, for example, and we could bring in another image. And so here's our, we have the suffragettes, we have the hand with pen. We could bring in our nurses, for example. And once again, play with their scale. And so now we have the nurses behind there. And if you wanted to give another kind of a feeling about their writing, could take, I'm going to take something very different for the moment, but some kind of a page that's been written on. What's that say? My mother, don't marry him until you see how he treats the waitress. Let's take this, just a page from a scientist's notebook. Okay, so lastly, what you could do is drag in some other kind of image. I'm going to put it on top of the hand with the pen. And again, use scale to blow it up. I'm going to kind of adjust it so it's sort of random. I'm going to use rotation to make it look a little more random. Think like that. And finally, I'm going to use opacity or transparency to make it look like it's kind of like giving that mood of writing. And now we have our movie, the beginning of the movie. We might fade out that. Let's take this opacity line and copy that keyframe. Copying the keyframe that says 38% opacity and pasting it, because now I'll go forward a little bit and reduce the opacity of that text to 0 over some time. And then the nurses come in. And then what we can do is bring in our other movie that's masking 1. And so the way we do that is, and so let's just remember we're at 19 seconds. So we could bring in our masking 1 movie, and we could do that by pushing up that masking 1 movie so that it begins at 19 seconds. And then we can cut off our other movies so they end at 19 seconds. And eventually, not this moment, we could make a nice transition by grouping them together. So let's see how that works. Oh, where's our masking 1 movie? It's not showing. Let's look at our masking 1 movie again. I thought we had it working. Fades in, the text. No? Oh, I have to turn it on. That's my problem. Okay, so now we have our masking 1 movie and our masking 2 movie. So this is how you can combine 2 movies together. We'll need to this one out. Because the compositions are different color backgrounds, we would have to make a decision about that. We don't need a composition background for masking 2. We don't really need it to be black. So I'm going to change that to white, composition settings, and make it conform. So say okay, and now we should be able to see our movies together. So let's try that out. That would be like the intro. Maybe it's a little bit long, but you get the idea. And then let's say that intro leads to the nurses. And then the second part of our movie. So this is how you use two compositions in one project. I made it a little bit not a good transition. So this is the next thing to play with. And so there's also obviously other kinds of ways this could go. This could begin with, so if you want to change, so there's a possibility of grouping layers, which might make sense when you have a few different kinds of things going on. So where you have all of these together, and then it fades to the nurses. You could group them all together and treat them all together. Or you could start with the other story, and you could cut all of these in half, Command D, and have them start and then use them over the second story right there. By pushing Command D. Pushing around the elements in different ways. The text works really well. So the point of this is to stimulate your curiosity a bit more as to how you might be able to tell a story by using different layers, as well as to give you a really strong idea of how you can make different kinds of masks that just use and animate basic shapes that reveal things, and masks that let you see through one object to something going on in the background. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. Come see me if you have any questions. And the last thing I want to say is, if you get confused, you can see what's going on right now. I moved a bunch of things around. First of all, feel free to do that. But if you get confused and you can't tell where things are, look at the left and use your little navigators to go frame by frame or keyframe by keyframe in order to tell what's going on and where it is. Sometimes that means you need to bring a certain layer to the top in order to make a project make sense, like now. Sometimes it means you have too many keyframes right next to each other that are doing almost the same thing, and you just need to fool around with it. And the point is mainly I want you to be able to start to look at how you can use layers in a more complicated way. And this is a good example here where we have the layer of text, we have a mask over the text, we have a layer of a transparent layer of text, of handwriting, and then we have the parade itself. And so it creates a really evocative image that tells more of the story than the words might tell by themselves. And this is the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much.